Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.
Welcome to Prairie Mosaic, a patchwork of stories about the arts, culture, and history in our region.
Hi, I'm Bob Danback.
And I'm Barb Gravel. On this edition, we'll visit a state park in Minnesota that was once the site of a fierce battle, watch a piece of wood become a trunk, and listen to an accomplished brass quintet. The legendary entertainer Judy Garland was born under the given name Frances Gumm in Grand Rapids, Minnesota in 1922. Her family moved to California when she was just a child, but her Minnesota roots are celebrated at the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids.
No more his eager call, the writings on the wall, the dreams you've dreamed have all.
The Judy Garland Museum was founded 40 years ago in 1975 by Jackie Dingman, a local artist. And it's grown over the years. We've had 9 celebrity guests, including the Wicked Witch of the West. She was our first guest in 1979.
Gain those ruby slippers. My power will be the greatest in Oz.
We get 20,000 visitors a year, and pretty amazing because Grand Rapids is quite remote. It grew sporadically over the years. There was a small exhibit in Central School, and then in 1990, some local people bought Judy Garland's house to protect it for the future, and then it went through a painstaking restoration in 1995, and we opened the house to the public in 1996.
And a couple of tra-la-las.
A wealthy benefactor bought the carriage 20 years ago this coming August over at a live auction from Christie's in New York City. And it's been on loan to the museum for the last 20 years. He also bought the dress from the film and a number of other artifacts, but the bulk of our collection has been donated by fans over the years from all over the country.
I'm not a witch at all. I'm Dorothy Gale from Kansas.
Oh. Well, is that the witch?
I had a collar made for him that says, "I'm a doggone Judy fan." We come to the Judy Garland Festival every year, and we enjoy it so very much. I have all sorts of stuff. I've been collecting since 1978. I have records on the walls, big theatrical release posters. It's just the way she touched an audience. It's emotional, just incredible. I mean, over the years, we've been coming up here since '89, and the people you meet they're just incredible people. We all love the same thing. That's the best part.
Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue.
Well, you think about the classic example. The song that most of us heard first, was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And you see this teenage girl telling this great story. I mean, she was really selling the story. She brought a song to life. The words meant something. It was just in the way she delivered it, like a great actress. Her singing developed at an early age, singing vaudeville with her sisters. But she had this sort of maturity to her voice that was beyond her years.
And suddenly the hinges started to unhitch. Just then, the witch, to satisfy...
We get several thousand people over a 3-day period. We have all kinds of activities downtown for kids. So it's progressed to a more family-friendly Wizard of Oz type event instead of strictly, Judy Garland.
There, we can see. Isn't that better?
She's a nice girl, and the museum's it's really cool. It has a lot of stuff that's very interesting.
The Gumms lived here for 12 years. Frank and Ethel, Judy's parents, bought an interest in our local movie theater and ran it for 12 years. And then they bought this home, their first family home. They were very proud of it, and they spent 7 years in that home. And they sang their way through North Dakota and Montana, all the way to Seattle to make money for their vacation. And they had friends that had moved to Los Angeles, so they visited and just fell in love with the weather. So that summer they came back, and October of 1926, they sold all their furniture and sang "California, Here We Come." Well, she always had the special talent. The other girls were acceptable, and they worked well as a trio. But when Judy was discovered by MGM, they broke up. The older girls were getting married, so it was a time to break up when she signed her movie contract.
Well, I think for a lot of people, because they fell in love with her, so many years before, they were going to hang with her regardless, because she was just such an all-American girl and such a sweet artist and such a gifted entertainer. They wanted to love her.
I never heard anybody sing just the way you do.
What do you mean, good or bad?
It's the combination of talent, all wrapped up into one tiny ball of 4'11". 50, 100 years from now, news stations are still going to be talking about The Wizard of Oz, because that is eternal. Frank Sinatra said, "We will all be forgotten, but never Judy."
Lloyd Weezy has been crafting a wide variety of cedar and steamer trunks, keepsake and special moment boxes for many years. For Weezy, there's character in the wood and a natural personality that he tries to reveal in each piece he crafts.
As you can see, the grain is so pretty on this. I always enjoyed working with my father on the farm, slinging the hammer. But the tight knots, the little tight, darker knots, is what blends with the top. So I'm going to go with this for that reason. We all like to destroy stuff, but I always like to rebuild with my dad. That was my first interest, really, in working with wood. I had to have a hobby, something of self-gratification. I read in the paper one night that this gentleman had, out on the farm, had some wood that he was trying to get rid of. Went out there, loaded up. It was basswood is what it was. I brought a big load home and made a dry sink, a hutch, made a little table, and had a fairly nice finish on it. I was just learning, just doing things. And my wife came out and said, "That's really nice, but I don't have a place for something like that in our house." I'm going to set it up this way. So I took it on myself to go to a consignment place. And before the end of the week, they gave me a call and said, "Do you want to bring some more items in? Everything is sold." So I called the gentleman up on the farm and I said, "Could I buy the rest of that basswood from you?" Then I went and tried a trunk, and I took that into the consignment, and I had a gentleman that bought the trunk actually call up and ask me if I'd build him another trunk. Ended up building him his trunk, took it to him, and he asked me if I could build him another one. Kind of dawned on me, Lloyd, trunks are used everywhere, from the attic to the basement. I had to learn how to build the trunks and build the trunks to where I felt comfortable with them too. My intent was to get into intarsia, relief carving, wood burning, all of that onto my trunks to make them unique and special. And my basic construction, because my trunks will have a tray, my trunks will have a bottom in it, I'll build the bottoms with 3/4 inch cedar, and I'll make the tray with cedar. Therefore, I don't have to put cedar lining into it. To build something that somebody thinks that they want, you're hoping they're describing what they do want, and you're hoping you're understanding what they want. My customers are my best sellers. I'm not a seller. I'm just a maker. I make sawdust. I've had gentlemen come into my booth and become carnival barkers. You have to come into this booth. You have to see what this fella is making.
Last year, my daughter and I were at the show, and my daughter went through every little chest and little, item that he had, and I could tell she really loved what he had created. So we came down here today looking for this booth so that we could buy her one for her birthday.
So I sell a lot of trunks that aren't personalized with all of the things that I would like to put on it. They're just pretty pieces of furniture.
The handcrafted work by an individual, it's so much more sturdy, and it just means so much more to me than getting it off of a furniture store and off of an assembly line. I just think there's just so much more personality put into their craft, and I just feel when I look at that piece of wood, it's not just wood, it's art.
It's very time consuming to more or less try to identify my woods, my grains and everything, tying it to what the person really is wanting and making sure that the product gets to that point. Some of my walnut trunks will have a white walnut running through it, or sometimes even a sapwood, or sometimes a gray wood running through it. Adds a lot of character. People like character. I like character in grains. I have an order right now, a person from Pennsylvania. He says, "You're the artist. You make it the way you want to." I'm going to do a trial assemble. The little treasure box, first the lid. My first initial intent was to make something that had no hardware to it and was two-toned out of two different woods. It can be a bird's eye maple, it can be anything. It can be cedar. And I'll see a grain that just says, "Hey, look at me." But I've only got one board. I pull that off to the side and that becomes a keepsake. I can make the whole keepsake out of that one board and keep the theme all exactly the same on that keepsake. And then everybody can enjoy what I was seeing with that piece of wood and keep that theme in there. My wife is my biggest critic. Anything I build has to pass the dust drag test. If the rag doesn't go across it without catching on anything, you're okay. If there's a rough spot anywhere, you gotta get that out. It's gotta be smooth. Building for somebody else something, yes, I put a lot of thought into it, but I never put it out the door unless I wouldn't keep it myself, so. Not this show.
Fort Ridgely State Park outside Fairfax in southern Minnesota boasts many unique features, including an authentic reconstruction by the Civilian Conservation Corps of the 1853 fort, which was the site of one of the fiercest battles of the U.S.-Dakota War.
Fort Ridgely is actually one of the oldest state parks. It was designated as a state park in 1911, and of course it was to honor the original fort that was built here in 1853, and then of course with the U.S.-Dakota War, the fact that that was such a pivotal place in what happened there. It was attacked here twice, and so the legislature deemed that they wanted to at least keep the fort in state hands. The Civilian Conservation Corps came in here, it would have been the end of July of 1934. Camp 2712. What they actually did was a lot of the groundwork. So they were doing a lot of the landscaping, and they started building some of the structures. It's interesting with the CCC when they came here because they did things that were beyond just recreation. In fact, they built a couple of check dams in the ravines. They also built these stone benches and they built stone picnic tables. So they did a lot of things that you normally didn't see in other state parks. There was all these young men, and I can imagine that they were always hungry, and that no matter how much they were fed, that it probably was never enough. You know, they came into this camps not having much food for themselves. They would have been here until October of 1935. Then again, like a lot of those companies, they were moved out. And then there was a period where there was nothing happening here at Fort Ridgely, and then they brought in a Veterans Conservation Corps group out of Camden State Park after they had finished working at that area. And they would have come in October of 1936, and then they stayed until the spring in 1938. And they finished like this building here, the caretaker's residence, the picnic shelters, the latrine. And then the unique thing about that company, they were the only company or camp that did a historical reconstruction, and they did it of the commissary of the original Fort Ridgely. And they were actually under the supervision of the National Park Service, and they would have also went through and identified the foundations of the other buildings that would have been at the post there. Like a lot of those military forts, they were used by the local residents. Once the military abandoned them, a lot of the materials were just taken. In fact, the commissary was used as a barn for years. The other unique thing about Fort Ridgely, it's the only state park in Minnesota with its own golf course. That was built actually in 1927. And everybody, you know, that I've talked to love playing the golf course.
Good shot.
Horseback riding is huge here, and we have a group camp area that we get a lot of horseback riders that'll camp overnight, and some will just come in during the day, and so we got a lot of trails for them to go on. And we have a really beautiful campground right down along the Fort Ridgely Creek, and then of course we offer programs throughout the year. We have a Friends of Fort Ridgely that pretty much every year bring in somebody to talk about the stars and planets. They actually do historical dramas at the amphitheater over there in the upper picnic area. And so it's really just a nice park to come and enjoy the quiet, because it is really quiet here.
The mature and refined music of the North Dakota State University Faculty Brass Quintet radiates throughout their entire performance of marches, bands, and medleys.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Brecky.
I'm one of the trumpet players in the NDSU Faculty Brass Quintet. The Bourbon Street Medley is 3 old Dixieland-style tunes from New Orleans. The first being Bourbon Street Parade, and then the second one is Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans? It finishes with When the Saints Go Marching In.
If you know of an artist, a topic, or an organization in our region that you think might make for an interesting segment, please contact us at prairiemosaic@prairiepublic.org. I'm Barb Gravel.
And I'm Bob Dambach. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Prairie Mosaic.
Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. The North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.